apparently it's the end of May. That means a reading wrap-up. Here are all the books I read in the month of May. Now, last time I counted there were 8. 8's probably usually more than I would read. Well, it is usually more than I would read in a normal month. The last couple of months I've read about 8, sometimes more, sometimes less, just because I've literally had nothing else to do. But yeah, 8's quite a lot for me. But I'm pretty impressed with myself, to be honest. And I'm just going to go and talk through all of these books about what I liked and what I didn't like about them and my star rating. So, the first book I read this month was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't enjoy it as much as The Starless Sea, which could be controversial because everyone seems to love The Night Circus and are a bit iffy about The Starless Sea. I did enjoy The Starless Sea, but that's for a different video. I really liked the atmosphere of this book. I liked the whole circus vibe. I thought that was really nice. It was really cool to like picture everything that was going on. And the travelling circus, like turning up and appearing in different countries around the world. I thought that was really cool. All of the characters I really enjoyed. They each had like their own individual sort of influence on the circus. I didn't really like the main characters though. The two that were the whole point of the book was that these 2 characters were playing this game that they didn't know they were playing or how to play, and it was just a bit weird. And I didn't like the conclusion to that. I didn't think it was very satisfying. So I just sort of picture the story without them in it, but I like the whole Bailey aspect. If you haven't read the book, there's a boy called Bailey who becomes interested in the circus, who isn't actually a part of the circus. And his storyline's really interesting, and I really enjoyed reading about him. And whenever I turned the page to a new chapter and it was a Bailey chapter, I'd get really excited because I knew that I was going to enjoy it. But yeah, overall 4 stars. Probably closer to 3, but I'm being generous. I'm a nice guy. The next book I read in the month of May was Dune. Now this is one of the most disgusting covers I've ever seen. Oh, it's not. It's a really nice cover. I like it, but what's that about? It's some weird SF Masterworks one, which I appreciate. It's a classic, but I'm not really a fan of that. Anyway, that hasn't influenced my decision on what I feel about it. I rate this book 2 stars. I did not enjoy it. And I feel like a lot of people can sympathise with me, but if you don't, here's why. I really appreciate what this book has done for sci-fi. From what I've heard and what I've read, this book has influenced thousands of books, TV shows, movies, everything. Like, this was one of the very first books in the sci-fi genre that really birthed various different elements. And for that, it deserves 5 stars for that. But the story itself, it got a 2 star for me. I really didn't enjoy it. There was a lot of characters, and maybe I just don't mesh well with like fantasy series with loads of characters. I mean, I enjoyed Game of Thrones, but other than that, I don't really mesh well with the whole like loads of characters, loads of different planets and politics. I hate reading about politics in books because it bores the hell out of me. So that was all a bit all over the place. There were loads of different races and religions, and as soon as I opened the book, I think it was at the beginning, but it could be at the end. Yeah, no, it must have been at the end. So I flick through. Yeah, there's like 50 pages of terminology of the Imperium. Like, as soon as there's an index or a glossary in a book, I know I'm not going to be a fan of it. If there's too many terms that I'm not going to understand, that you need a glossary at the back of your book, it's not going to be the book for me. Like I said, I appreciate what this book did, but I didn't enjoy it. Sorry. And the next book I read following Dune was The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett. I really enjoyed this book, and I've been wanting to pick this up for ages. I've been seeing these every time I've been in work. They're lovely hardback editions of the Terry Pratchett Discworld series, and I've always wanted to start Terry Pratchett because I thought it would kind of be my thing. So I decided to buy the first one. If you didn't know, the Discworld series, there's loads of different sort of like avenues you can pursue in the Discworld series. So there's loads of starting points. They're all standalone as far as I'm aware, but they all follow like either the same character or this. I'm not entirely sure, so I don't know why I'm talking like I know what I'm going on about. But The Colour of Magic is the first book in one of these threads throughout Discworld, and I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 3 stars overall. I didn't think it was amazing. It was my first foray into absurdism, I believe it's categorised under. So everything was a bit weird and wonderful, which was sometimes hard to keep track of who was where, but I really enjoyed the characters. I thought they were really funny. Some of the humour in it is hilarious. And I did find myself actively like laughing at some of the stuff, which is bizarre because usually I'm just sort of like deadpan reading a book. But this, I was genuinely laughing at some of the stuff that was in there. Some of the lines were really good and really well thought out. And yeah, I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the magic, but sometimes I was getting a bit lost in how weird it was. And that's probably what brought it down for me a bit. But yeah, overall, I think I am going to continue with more of the Discworld series. Whether or not I'll continue on in the, I think it's the Rincewind series this one's from, whether or not I continue with this, or if I start the first book of another thread of the Discworld series, I might start with that. But who knows. Following that, I then read Normal People by Sally Rooney. I was surprisingly shocked by this book. The only reason I picked it up, like I said, I work in Waterstones and I've been seeing this book everywhere. Everyone hypes it, about it all the time. But recently the BBC adaptation came on TV. I have not watched it, but everyone has been hyping it up. Everyone on Twitter's been talking about it, everyone on Facebook's been talking about it, and I was like, it must be good then. But I was like, I want to read the book first, really, if I'm going to watch the TV series. So I decided to buy the book. And it's not the usual thing that I would read, but I flew through it. I could not stop reading this book, and literally nothing happens in the book. And usually I'm all about like big thrillers and like, you know, huge action scenes, but this, literally nothing happens. You just flick through the pages and you read about these two people and their interaction with each other. But I literally just couldn't put it down. It was so weird, because it's not the sort of thing that I usually enjoy. But I loved it so much, I had to give it 5 stars. The ending, I think everyone's a bit, I don't know. The thing is, I've watched the first episode on the TV series, and I didn't know if I really enjoyed it. But the book ends kind of ambiguous, which I loved and also didn't love at the same time. But the whole journey I thought was amazing. There was some very explicit sex scenes in it, which I wasn't prepared for and don't really enjoy reading, but that was interesting. That was a first for me. But overall, yeah, 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book and I can totally understand why it won all the awards that it did. Next, Haven't They Grown by Sophie Hannah. I picked this book up solely because I love Sophie Hannah. I haven't read, this is going to sound weird now, I haven't read any of her normal thriller books. The only books that I did read are her adaptation of Agatha Christie's Poirot. So if you don't know, Sophie Hannah's been given permission by the Agatha Christie Foundation to continue to write Poirot stories. So a few years ago I was gifted some of those for Christmas and I flew through them. I absolutely love Agatha Christie and I read loads of her books, and when I saw that there was a modern, not a modern Poirot, but Poirot written in a modern style from a modern author, if that makes any sense at all, I knew I had to read them and I flew through them. I thought they were really good, really enjoyable. And when I saw that she had a new one out, I knew I had to read it. The premise got me from the get-go. The premise is that this lady is friends with another lady who has 2 small children, about 5 and 3 years old. The 2 ladies fall out. And about 12 years later, the one lady decides she's going to probably go and stalk this other lady just to see how her old friend's getting on. She drives up to her old house and spies out of a window to see, you know, if she can make anything about her life 12 years later. And her friend arrives home, she's watching her pull into her driveway and get out of her car, and her 2 children also get out of the car, who are still 5 and 3 years old, despite it being 12 years later. And it's her trying to wrap her head around how she can still have 2 children who have not aged in 12 years. And it's a really good story. It follows this lady, and what I love about this thriller is you're constantly questioning who's in the right. Is she in the right for stalking this lady? Is she going insane? She's doubting her own sanity, her family are doubting her sanity, but she's confident that she knows what she knows. She saw what she saw. It wasn't sort of like a twist on her mind or anything like that. And it's her adventure and her story into going and finding out what is going on with these kids. Why haven't they grown? I also forgot to mention my star rating, which was 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book, but I think the ending let it down a slight bit. There is a scene at the end which I won't say for spoilers, but there's a scene at the end which feels very uncharacteristic of the character. I feel like you get a sense of who she is as a person throughout the book, and then right at the end there is a scene that she is in that I completely question her character, and I'm like, I feel like she wouldn't do this, but there you go. And another book that I read in May, which many other people probably have as well, is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I rated this book 4 stars. There's a review on my channel if you want to go and watch that, where I talk a bit more detail about it, but it's my first ever video, so it's kind of a mess. But I really enjoyed this book up until about 2/3 of the way through. The first 2 parts were really good, exploring life in the capital just after the war, the very early stages of the Hunger Games, exploring characters that we know like President Snow, but very early on, and you can see a slow descent into madness. I really enjoyed the Hunger Games, I really enjoyed the characters that were in it, but yeah, I felt like the 3rd part let it down quite a lot. It was a lot longer than it needed to, and I feel like the book could have gone in different directions, which would have made it better, but that's just my own personal taste. But I did still enjoy it, so it was 4 stars for me. Next, after reading about 500 pages of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I decided to pick up a shorter one, which I flew through in a day, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I read The Magician's Nephew a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed that. I watched The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe when I was a kid. I never watched any of the other films, so I knew exactly what happened in this book, but it was quite short and it was on my TBR for a while, so I thought I'd give it a go. And it's really nice, especially this edition. It's got some really beautiful, colourful illustrations in it. I'm going to flick through and I'm not going to be able to find any now because, there we go, it's Mr. Tumnus. There were elements of the book which I wasn't expecting, where the author sort of breaks the 4th wall type thing. So you're reading a chapter and he's like, oh, remember what I told you in the last chapter? And I was like, well, it sort of took me out of it a bit. I wasn't expecting him to be like, hello reader, remember the last chapter? And I was like, okay, I'm reading a book. I also felt like the book lacked a lot of tension. When I watched the film, I mean it's been years since I've watched the film, but I remember the scene where, spoilers, but this is a book that is very old now, where Aslan dies. I feel like that was a very tense scene for me as a kid. And then 20 minutes later Aslan is resurrected and everyone's happy. And in this book he dies, and then literally on the next page he is resurrected. So I was like, oh, I mean I knew it was coming, but I was like, oh, I was not expecting that to be resolved so quickly. And I'd say typically I'd give this book 3 stars because it was fine. But I'm bumping it up to 4 because 1, I'm a generous guy, as we've established apparently, and 2, because it's nostalgic for me. I loved this film as a kid. I'm sure I read the book as a kid as well. It has a special place in my heart, this one. And the final book that I read this month is The Taking of Annie Thorne by C.J. Tudor. I've read all of C.J. Tudor's books so far, and I say all of them, there's only been another 2 than this as far as I'm aware. The Chalk Man, which I absolutely loved, and The Other People, which I read last month or the month before, which again was amazing. So as soon as I got my hands on The Taking of Annie Thorne, I knew I was going to love it. However, I was a bit disappointed. I still think it's a good book, I just don't think it lives up to the standards of The Chalk Man and The Other People. I believe this book has a different title in America. I think it's called The Hiding Place or something, but I'm not 100% sure. But here it's called The Taking of Annie Thorne. It follows a man it does get split into 2 timelines at some point. It follows a man whose sister goes missing for a while, and then she turns up later on and she isn't ever the same. And you sort of don't know what happens to her, and then later on in his life he gets this email coming through saying, this thing's happening again. It's happening to another child. And he sort of goes to figure out what's going on. I did enjoy this book. It's very mysterious and a bit weird, and it does have some supernatural elements to it. But what I thought was the supernatural elements are fine, because I'm not supposed to be able to believe that they're true. But when things that are so coincidental that you can't believe they're true, I just can't forgive it. In this book, I wouldn't say it's a spoiler because it happens right at the beginning. He moves to this town that he used to live in and gets a job at the school that he used to go to as a kid. And he takes the job of this teacher who's died, which is already coincidental because he happens to teach the same subject as this lady who's died. But now she's dead, her house is up for sale, and he rents out her house. So he starts to rent out the lady's house, who also teaches the same subject as him, who he also takes her position at the school. And the mystery surrounds her and her child, who has had seemingly the same thing that his sister had happened to him. And it just all feels very coincidental that him and this lady share so much in common, yet it's completely unrelated. They both have this weird thing happen. He then takes her job and moves into her house. It just seems a bit coincidental for me. But overall, I did enjoy it. I thought it was a bit eerie and creepy, but I gave it 3 stars overall. But I'm still looking forward to a new one. I believe there is a new one coming out. I can't remember the name, but it's coming out sometime this year. And that's it. That's all 8 books that I've read this month. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's probably been super long, so apologies for that. Give this video a like. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these, what you thought of them, any that you'd recommend from the ones that I've read so far. Hit subscribe. Please give me all the support you can, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.